Okay, thanks, Kelly, and thanks everybody for joining us this afternoon. We really appreciate your time, and as Kelly said, we're so excited to be able to introduce this new toolkit to all of you to hopefully make your lives at work a little bit easier. So with that, I'll start with what we'll cover today to give you an idea of what you can expect. We know that any type of task as it relates to the human resources world, it can be overwhelming, especially when it all kind of piles on at once, whether you're hiring one employee or multiple employees at once. If you're onboarding all of them, it can become a lot. So that's where this HR toolkit was designed to hopefully alleviate some of that burden. Um, that's, with the HR toolkit, it consists of a lot, and you might have seen this in the advertisement of the HR toolkit initially, but it's a collection of different templates, checklists, best practices that you can refer to save, not only save time and to be more, it's really just out of convenience, but it's also, all of this was designed with risk in mind. What can we help our members do to mitigate risk in the world of human resources related activities? So that's where this toolkit comes to play to help with not only saving time, convenience, but also compliance. So we'll first start with an overview of the HR toolkit itself. It actually consists of about 19 downloadable documents that you will have access to. So most of them are Word documents that you'll be able to customize and edit. A couple of them are Excel files, and I believe there's 2 PDFs. So it's pretty comprehensive, and I'm excited to dive into that. With that, we'll do a closer look at each of the 4 key sections that we've really broken this toolkit down into, as really 4 kind of core areas. If you think of human resources, we've broken it down into 4 areas. And then, I think what will be most beneficial, or what I hope will be most beneficial for all of you if you're interested in this toolkit, is this webinar is going to be a little bit more interactive, meaning we'll do a live walkthrough of how to access and use some of these documents in the toolkit. I don't know that we'll have time to go through all of them today, but I really want to be able to show you how to download it and kind of how we've designed it to be customizable to suit your individual and business needs. So we'll be taking a live walkthrough of all of that, which means I will be kind of going back and forth from the presentation to the items in the toolkit. So bear with me when we get to that point. And then as Kelly had mentioned, we'll save time at the end for some of your questions. Please don't be shy and feel free and be encouraged to add those questions into the chat, and we'll be happy to review those. I'm sure if you have a question, someone else is probably wondering the same thing. So it's a good time to ask those questions. And of course, if something comes up maybe later on after the webinar, you can feel free to contact us. You'll receive our contact information as well. So please stay in touch. All right, let's get into kind of the overview of the HR toolkit. So we know that hiring a full-time HR professional or administrative assistant, that's not always feasible, especially for a small business. But what that often kind of results in is either the business owner or managers wearing a lot of hats and juggling not only their primary role, whatever that may be, or even operating the business, to also wearing the HR hat of hiring employees, extending offers, posting jobs on Indeed or on your website if you have an opening, extending offer letters, onboarding them, which I think we all can agree that's a process in and of itself. And so that leaves you just trying to juggle it all, and that's where there's bound to be kind of a gap where something can slip through the cracks. So that's where this toolkit comes into play. Designed to be comprehensive, and it's a customizable collection of things. I like to say it kind of touches on the full employee life cycle. Of course, there's, certain things that may not be included, such as like a termination letter, but it's kind of covering those key areas of the employee life cycle, ranging from recruiting to getting that new employee onboarded. And then once they're trained and onboarded and kind of settling into their role, then you kind of move into a phase with all employees of retention and keeping your team members engaged, but also kind of tying into that the policy side of things. So, handbooks and different policies and procedures to keep your team aligned and kind of working well together. And so, what I also want to make sure everybody here knows too is that this isn't just, a toolkit comprised of, boilerplate documents that we think or expect will work well for you. A lot of this is, tested, tried and true resources that we use. So I use a lot of this in my daily work to support the internal team at SBAM, and it all works very well. So it's all proven, practical, ready to go, and we hope that you'll feel the same if you were to use the benefits in this toolkit. Um, so with that, the toolkit, like I said before, divided into 4 core sections with recruiting, onboarding, retention and engagement, and policy. And like I said, they're all customizable for the most part. So if something doesn't apply to your business or it really just doesn't make sense, depending on the industry that you're in, you can add or remove things that just don't apply. This cover page here to the right of the text gives you kind of a good summary or breakdown into what each section consists of. But like I said, we'll do a more thorough deep dive into each one here in just a moment. And actually, I think, sorry, one last thing that I wanted to add to this too is just kind of when we think about this toolkit, it's not just covering like the big ticket items that you may think would be included in a toolkit. You'll see kind of sprinkled in there some things that you wouldn't necessarily think of. For example, the welcome email template, which we'll take a look at, that's designed to, when you are onboarding a new employee, best practice is to send them a welcome email maybe 2 to 3 business days before they join your company. It's something that can be often overlooked, but when we think about ensuring, a positive onboarding experience for a new employee, that can really set your company apart. It's kind of the little things that can change their experience and really kind of make them feel excited about the new group or the new team that they're about to work with. So it's kind of a mix of bigger ticket items mixed in with the little things that the finer touches that you might not think about when it comes to these activities. Okay, so starting with section 1, we're going to dive into recruiting. That's generally kind of the first phase when we think about the employee life cycle. So if you have an open position, what are the things that would be helpful in ensuring kind of a seamless recruiting process? And so we broke it down into the following templates, resources, and best practices, ranging from a job description template, an employment application, interview questions. And the interview questions, I just wanted to point out here too, I've sat through interviews where you might not have a list of questions ready to ask the candidate, and that can result in just you're kind of fumbling, you might forget what you wanted to ask, or it just might seem like you're not prepared. Or worst case, maybe a hiring manager asks a question that maybe they're not supposed to. So we have to be careful about that as well. So this template around the interview questions really helps give you a guide into what are some really good, I call them HR cookie cutter questions, but they're really good questions to ask really any position, regardless of what opening you have. They're all really good questions to ask. So we'll take a look at that in a moment as well. And then we also have designed the post-interview candidate scorecard, which, especially if you're hiring, if you have a lot of openings at once, or if you're interviewing a lot of candidates for one position, it can sometimes be hard to come to a decision. So we've created this scorecard, which there's a little preview here that I'm hovering my cursor over. This is in an Excel format, and there's some evaluation criteria with a scoring mechanism that can help you determine um, who you want to move forward with or who maybe doesn't really meet the criteria that you're looking for that role. So we'll look at that as well. There's a reference check form. So if you are interested in doing a reference check for a prospective candidate that you would like to move forward with, but you want to do a reference check, we've come up with that template as well. And then something I am excited about is a sample offer letter, which seems so straightforward, but sometimes offers can be verbally extended or it's just kind of more of an informal process. So this gives you the information and the tools that you need to formally extend an offer, and it covers all of the topics that should be included in an offer, including the at-will employment language at the bottom. So we will look at that here in a moment. And then this is not something that we created, but the Earned Sick Time Act poster is included in the toolkit purely out of convenience. As you know, if you have attended our ESTA webinars, uh, earlier in the year, we talked a lot about all of the requirements under the Earned Sick Time Act. And one of those requirements is if you have a candidate who accepts and signs their offer, you have to give them a notice of the Earned Sick Time Act poster. So just as a kind of a reminder to you, we've included that in the toolkit as well. So with that, I'm going to move to my other screen. And I thought it would be helpful to kind of go through if you're new to purchasing our toolkits, I thought it'd be helpful to show how we download and how you would go about using some of these templates. So we'll first take a look at the employment application. We click view and then download. All right. So with the employment application, when you do have an open position and someone expressed interest in applying, really there should be another step versus if someone is interested and they just send you their resume, it should be followed by some type of formal application. So that's where this would come into play. Before I kind of scroll into the contents of this template, you'll see it in really all of the Word documents, you'll see this header above the dotted line. That's just kind of our way of giving you some instructions and some context into, how you might go about using this template. Like I've said a couple of times now, everything can be customized. And we tried to point out where you would want to make some updates. So here, for example, insert your company name and address at some type of header. And of course, when you are ready to use these documents, you can delete our language here and just make it your own document. What's nice about this application is it's pretty simple and straightforward. All of these text boxes are fillable, so it makes it clean. I think sometimes Word can get a little finicky with the formatting, so we found this is the best way to keep things clean and organized. We have an important statement here as an equal opportunity employer. This is always good to have on your applications as well.
Now, I hate to interrupt you, but
Sure.
we can only see the black preview.
Oh, no. Okay, 1 second.
That's okay.
Sorry about that. Thanks for letting me know. Can we
Mm-hmm.
see it now?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll just back up really quick. This header I was referring to, this is something those are just some notes to yourself regarding how to use the template, but it can be removed when you're ready to make it your own. So you'd insert your information up here about your company. And this, like I said before, we've tried to keep it simple and not too high level. It's pretty functional. You can add the date, enter, everything is in these text boxes to make it clean, to not kind of mess up the formatting. Um, And then they would just kind of get into the questions. I won't go through this line by line here. But this can be repurposed for all of your employment applications. It's designed to be for any type of job application, whether it's professional, administrative, clerical, or even technical. But you could certainly add things that maybe don't apply. All right. One second here. I gotta share my screen again. Okay. The next thing that I'll share is the interview questions template. Review this, download. Can you see the interview questions or do I need to change it? Okay, great. So with the interview questions, as I mentioned before, this is a really nice thing to have when you are interviewing. It can be difficult to sometimes come up with questions off the cuff, or, you want to make sure that you're asking the right questions. So of course, this can be customized to maybe if you want to add more specific questions to a role, you can certainly do that as well. But these, as I mentioned, these are kind of it's a mix of some standard human resource professional questions that are always good to ask in an interview. Um, what are your strengths and weaknesses, that type of thing. So this is about 26 questions that we would recommend putting into or incorporating into any interview that you host, especially the formal on-site interviews that are in person. And I've also included a link here to just a tip to avoid those personal questions that that might subject you to some compliance issues. Um, Additional tips are actually available on the EEOC website. So some questions that you should avoid in interviews as well have been incorporated into this template. All right. And then we'll get into the post-interview candidate scorecard. So let's say after you received that application, you've went through that interview and you're ready to score them, then comes in the post-interview candidate scorecard. Can we see this still? Great. Okay, so with this, it looks kind of complex, but it's designed to be pretty simple. You didn't enter the candidate information here. And then there's some evaluation criteria to help you essentially come to a decision. There's the rating criteria. So on a scale of 1 to 3, 1 being needs improvement, meaning there's really some significant gaps in the skills or experience that you're looking for, all the way up to exceeds expectations. And so depending on how that interview just went, which we recommend you fill this out right after the interview when that meeting is fresh in your mind, you can go in and insert, oops, I have to enable editing. You can go in and say, okay, well, maybe relevant work experience is a 1, but they have, a lot of technical skills. When you fill in all of those boxes, it will come up with a total here at the bottom. So it is a functional Excel spreadsheet. There's a section here for open-ended comments where you can list maybe some strengths that maybe aren't covered in the evaluation criteria, other areas for improvement, and then a final recommendation for you, especially if you have multiple people on your hiring team. If it's 2 people, both of you could fill this out and hopefully come to an agreement on next steps. To some, this might seem a bit like overkill, like why do I need to fill out a scorecard? But when you do have a lot of applicants for a position, let's say you have 5 interviews scheduled, it can kind of they can all suddenly kind of start to mix together and you start to forget, okay, what did I like about this person? What was this person missing? And so when you incorporate the scorecard into the process, especially right after that interview, those notes are documented, and you can come to an informed decision when you're ready to make that call to extend an offer. So we hope that that's helpful to you as well. All right. And then the last thing in the recruiting section that I would like to show you all is the sample offer letter. So let's say according to the scorecard, we are excited and we've agreed to extend that candidate an offer letter. We will pull out our offer letter template out of the toolkit because we're ready to go. We're excited to extend an offer, and this is what it would look like. So there are some instructions here, as I've mentioned before, that you'll want to look at. And again, just a reminder, all of that can be deleted when you're ready, or you can save a copy and make that your working document. But just know in this template, it's really the standard things that you would see covered in a general, like a typical offer letter. But it certainly can be customized. If something is in here that doesn't quite apply, just go ahead and delete it. And again, if that offer is signed, you'll want to give them a copy of the Earned Sick Time Act notice right away. So to get started, it's always good to insert your logo if you have one, so you could paste that into the header, excuse me, of your offer letter, add the date, the candidate's information here, and then we've tried to make this as easy as possible with the bracketed fields. So you would just go in and insert, the job title. Maybe it's a shipping and receiving associate at, SBAM or something. And then you just go through and fill out what applies, including compensation, fringe benefits. So if your company offers health insurance, it's pretty standard to include what those benefits are. If an employee is going to accept, they generally want to know what those benefits looks like. So be sure to include that in addition to any other fringe benefits like paid time off, you would put in the offer letter as well. It's also a standard practice to note what the offer is contingent upon, whether that be a background check or a background check and a drug test, or maybe signing a confidentiality and a non-compete agreement, that type of thing. So you could always include that. If these two things don't apply, you can go ahead and delete it. Again, use it how it will work for you and your company. I always recommend having this type of statement regarding your at-will employment in Michigan. So always good to have that in your offer letter, and then signing at the bottom. And then of course, if the candidate decides to accept, they can sign the offer letter. So I hope that's helpful. We'll go back to, can you still see my screen? The
Yep.
presentation now?
Yep, we can see the presentation.
Great. Thanks, everyone. All right. So we'll go back to the presentation here and move into section 2, which is onboarding. So the onboarding, so now that we have a signed offer letter, we've given them their ESTA notice. Now we're in the onboarding phase of the toolkit. So it's pretty exciting when you get a signed offer letter, and sometimes it's a little overwhelming to think about, okay, what's next? And if you don't have these steps documented, it can become, like I've said, overwhelming, but then that's when things tend to get missed, depending on the person's position and what your company does. There can be a lot of prep work. So this consists of a pre-employment onboarding checklist. In my time with onboarding, there's just a lot of work just to onboard one person. There's a lot to do. So it's nice to have all of that documented into a checklist. And I hope we can all agree that this work starts well before day one. A lot of these activities can start, 1 to 2 weeks before your new employee is scheduled to join your team. So to get ahead of that, it's good to start 1 to 2 weeks beforehand. And then we'll get into a comprehensive onboarding toolkit or onboarding package. There's a lot of value in that alone. So I'd like to take some time to review that. We talked a little bit about this before, but the welcome email template, which kind of touches on the finer details to ensure that smooth experience for your new hire. A 90-day new hire onboarding survey to really assess, okay, how are things going get their feedback and maybe evaluate how things could improve in the future. Depending on your company, if you don't do a lot of hiring, maybe that doesn't apply to you. Um, but we thought maybe for many businesses that would. And then in addition to that, an I-9 employment eligibility resource guide, there are a lot of requirements to the Form I-9. And so we not only included those requirements, which you could of course always see on um, the USCIS website, but we also included some really helpful best practices in light of, the recent inspections, the immigration inspections. It's good to make sure that um, you're doing all of the right things as it relates to the Form I-9. So with that, I'll stop presentation and we'll get into the onboarding checklist. So we just view and download. All right, just let me know if anybody can't see this. We have our new hire onboarding checklist with the header here, of course, with some of those instructions. I kind of talked about this a minute ago, but a new hire onboarding internal checklist ensures a smooth, organized, and consistent onboarding experience for every employee. That's the goal. And it really helps to cover all of those essential tasks that could be overlooked. And unfortunately, a lot of times it is a lot of paperwork, a lot of just admin tasks that we might not enjoy, but they are important. And so you can certainly add or remove things that don't apply. You could just, for ease of use, fill in their name, job title, start date, and their manager. And we've tried to organize this in kind of different milestones. So before their first day, these are some things that you should think about doing. First thing I do if I have a new hire joining, I have the signed offer, create that personnel file, and right out of the gate, you can save the resume, application, and the signed offer letter to that file. These are functional, excuse me, I guess they're not functional, but you can check off those boxes to mark those as complete, or they are functional. I just have to enable editing. There we go. So you can check those as complete as appropriate. Order the drug tests, background check, all of that. Now, what's key is some of these things in the toolkit tie together. So you'll see it says update onboarding toolkit with the manager, or depending on your team dynamics, maybe it is just the manager doing it themselves. So that onboarding toolkit is something that we'll look at in just a moment. Schedule 30, 60, 90-day touch points, which tie into the training objectives in that onboarding toolkit. And then other things, updating the org chart. If you have a parking garage, it'd be good to order their parking badge in advance. A lot of payroll systems have the onboarding modules built into the payroll system where you can send in advance of day one. You can send their tax forms that they can complete electronically, direct deposit, and those types of things. I won't go through all of this, but there's first day activities, things that really should be talked about during day one orientation. So scanning their IDs for the Form I-9, providing a company overview, that's really important. You want your new hire to really be familiar with what you do and what your mission is, what your core values are, how to go to IT for support, how to request PTO. And then we have after orientation some follow-up items. So again, can be totally personalized to fit your needs. All right, and now we'll get into kind of what this is this is kind of the biggest item of the toolkit. So let me get there. The onboarding toolkit is an Excel file. While it loads, 1 second. Okay. So this is intended to be a printable workbook that once you've completed it, before first day, remember, this can be printed out, stapled together, and it's something tangible that you can present to your new hire. Not only does it show that you have a plan, and that you're prepared, but it naturally is going to give that new employee a really good feeling like, oh, I'm actually, my team is excited for me. There's a plan to help me, become a trained, fully productive employee. And that feels good. It's not always common for that to happen, and sometimes can leave a new hire feeling kind of isolated or sometimes bored too, if there's not a plan in place to get them trained. So this is intended to kind of combat that. This is the cover page table of contents. We have a pre-employment manager's checklist, which is kind of more nuanced depending on the position. It covers like key introductions to team members, and maybe specialized access depending on the role. A first day agenda, getting started conversations, and then the training objectives. So this is something that we use with our new hires at SBAM. We've gotten really positive feedback. So let's dive into each tab. And I'm sorry, there are some directions up here. So that is key that you'll want to follow when you're working through each tab. That's going to be helpful as you walk through how to use it. So like I said, the manager's checklist, you might be wondering, okay, why do I have two different checklists? I have my onboarding and then I have this one. This is really going to be nuanced for that individual. Not only, kind of things like, do they have their laptop, but it's really about, do I need to add them to a team email distribution just because they're in engineering? They need to be added to this email distribution. Or depending on their role, they need a certain special network access, that type of thing. So it's more nuanced. And then it's also more about introductions to help them become more assimilated with your team and your culture. Scheduling introductions with management may or may not be necessary depending on the role. With peers, I think that's important for everybody. So that's really more for the manager. The first day agenda, this is so important. This is something that you would actually embed into your welcome email. So you would take a little screenshot of it and paste it into the welcome email. Really just gives that new hire an idea of what to expect on day one. This is just an example of what you could use that we came up with. You'd insert the times in this column, the agenda items in the middle one, and then the point of contact, whoever's responsible for handling that that item, that agenda item. So again, the agenda might take a little bit of work up front before the first day, but it's critical that that's done beforehand. Getting started conversations, again, I'm sure some of you may be wondering, why? Why do we need to have this, formal conversation? And it's really intended to kind of spark that dialogue between a manager and a new employee. It's it's not like you need to write down every answer during, that meeting with the new employee, but it's just so that you can introduce yourself as a manager, as a leader, talk about what's important to you, what are your expectations of the role, preferred communication methods, all of that. But then it also gives the new employee a chance to, connect with the manager and describe what drives them, what motivates them in their role, what are their goals. Really good conversation to have as a new employee. One thing to note is that would be in this meeting. I recommend keeping this in the agenda. The getting started conversations with manager should happen on day one, where they would just review this together. All right, and then we get into training objectives. So this is where you outline some actionable objectives or goals for that new employee to complete in the first 30, 60, and 90 days. This is really the part between this and the agenda. That's where really some of the work happens before the first day. that you would really want to give some thought beforehand to populate into the workbook, and then you can print it out. This is also something that you would review at the same time of the getting started conversations, which includes that review of training objectives. I'm sure this seems like a lot. If you have questions, please ask. And I'm also happy to provide some guidance. If you do purchase the toolkit, happy to provide some guidance one-on-one as well. All right. Let's get into the last item here within this section, which is the I-9 Employment Eligibility Resource Guide. And this is just a PDF that we created. So I'll open that up. So I won't spend too much time here. A lot, of course, you might be wondering, the requirements are listed on the USCIS website. But what this does, where it kind of stands out, is it's a little bit more like like kind of step-by-step walkthrough of how to process this form. I think it's kind of easy to miss something, or to maybe do something that actually you may be unknowingly, kind of not complying with the rules of the I-9. So this is where we tried to lay it all out to make sure that nothing was missed. We walk through step one, which is the version of the form. There are requirements on the version, or the date of the version that you're using. So we stipulate what that should be, how to, inform the new employee of their duty to provide documentation, which is included in that welcome email template, a reminder to bring their documentation on their first day, how to complete section 2, and the remaining sections. Like I said, I won't spend too much time on this one, but I did want to point out we went through quite a bit of detail as it relates to storing the Form I-9. The Form I-9 really shouldn't be saved in with an employee's personnel file. Really, they should all be kind of stored separately, maybe in a secure binder in a safe location that's locked, or maybe electronically separate from personnel files. So that's where we go into more detail on some of those guardrails. The retention period is also important. But what I really wanted to talk about here is the E-Verify and internal audits. I think I might have mentioned this before, but in light of some of the recent inspections regarding employment eligibility and inspections of all of your Form I-9s, there are some serious risks if you are not compliant with this, whether it be a civil or criminal penalty. So really important, although it's not required. You can participate with something called E-Verify. I believe it is free. It's kind of just an added layer of protection to confirm employment eligibility. So what it does is you would plug in that individual's personal information. It does require the social security number. It's a secure website, and it helps to confirm their identity and authorization to work in the United States. So again, not required for most employers in Michigan, but could be something that you want to add to your process to ensure compliance. And then in addition to that, another recommendation would be the internal audits. We kind of, in this PDF here, we recommend maybe every 6 months, or at a minimum annually, reviewing all of the Form I-9s that you have. And kind of, it's tedious, I'm sure, but going through each section to make sure that it's filled out correctly, and that if something has expired, that you need to update the document as well. So all of that is covered in this PDF. Okay. Now let's go back to this. Uh-oh. we'll just stay here for a second. There's an issue with it going back. Section 3, retention and engagement. So, you've gone through the recruiting process, you've onboarded your team members. Let's say, you have a good team, everybody's trained and doing well. What's key is to now focus on retention and engagement. And so, what this portion of the toolkit offers is, performance review template. I think a lot of people don't always get a performance review, or maybe every year it's hit or miss. So this toolkit offers a complete performance review template that we actually use internally as well, which is, I'm really excited to share with all of you. So I can share that. There's also something called a stay interview template, which is a nice way to stay engaged with your team members. It's recommended to do a stay interview at least every year, and it could be with your manager or with HR and the manager and the employee. And it just talks about, what has their experience been so far? Do they have any feedback? What are their pain points or roadblocks? And it helps you kind of get in front. It's a more proactive approach to get in front of any issues that should be addressed so that you don't risk losing that individual. So, really good thing to incorporate into retention and engagement. And then we also have a recognition program sample that you could consider incorporating into your company. Recognition is very important to me. It helps to keep your team engaged, and it can be really fun. It's a fun way to kind of bring people together to recognize the work of their coworkers and their peers. So, a couple of different things sprinkled into this section that we hope will be helpful for you. So really quick, I will show just the performance review template in the interest of time. I want to make sure we leave room for questions. So, all right, here is the performance review template. Um, Again, all of this, we recommend there's some important instructions here, so be sure to take a look at that. And here is where really the whole idea of this style is it's core competency based. So it's evaluating not only the individual on their daily responsibilities of their role, which is this section number 1, job knowledge and skills, but it's also focusing on other core competencies that are really really critical to a high performing employee. Excuse me. So you have teamwork and collaboration, accountability and dependability, initiative, productivity, and problem solving. With each core competency, you would have the ability to rate that. I'll do it right here. There's a rating system with 5 different options. And included in the toolkit is a separate Word doc where it would show the rating criteria and how you would use those scoring options and additional training to help this work well for all of your managers. And then with each section here, the manager can leave feedback explaining, the reason for their selection and maybe opportunities to improve or where they're really doing well. So, and then at the end, we also, and this is totally up to you all, you can do a review of the prior year, the goals for that individual, but then also a goal setting exercise for the upcoming year. The manager comments, kind of overall a summary, employee self-reflection is super important, and then signatures and acknowledgements as well. And then that could also be saved to their personnel file. Okay, let's move into the last section, and then we will have about 10 minutes left or so for questions. The last section here is really around policy. And this is, giving you resources to maybe a standards of conduct that maybe you don't have currently that your team would benefit from. A big one is the handbook template, which I understand in my conversations with Kelly, she's a little bit more member facing. A lot of members have come to us looking for help with getting started with a handbook. So no need to start from scratch. This is a template that we use internally that you can use as well to hopefully help get you started. A photo release form, which is always a good thing. If you're posting to social media pictures of your team, it's good to have their consent. And then also an acknowledgement of the handbook and code of conduct. If you joined any of our previous Earn Sick Time Act webinars, you know that we always recommend with a handbook rollout or a handbook update to make sure all of your team members sign and acknowledge a form stating that they read and understand the handbook. So that is included as well. And for purposes of this demonstration, I'll show you the handbook. So the handbook, I think, out of everything would take the most time to review and make sure that everything applies to you. It's a pretty long document. I think it's still loading. I want to say it's in between 50 and 60 pages. We really tried to cover everything for you, but certainly I know everybody is different. All companies are different. If something doesn't apply, go ahead and delete it. Um, it's worth your time to do that before rolling it out without looking at it. So um, add your company name and then go through all of the different sections to update what's appropriate. And what I'll do is, oops, I'm sorry if it's making you dizzy. There's a section here. We tried to highlight anything that would require a decision point or an edit on your end or input from you. We tried to highlight everything and put it into brackets. So it's organized by section. So you can see here, anything in red would require your input. I won't review this in too much detail here, but I can't stress enough the importance of taking a look at that in detail. Give yourself some time. It's 65 pages, so give yourself some time to update that and make it applicable to your team.